to love. And this is what walking in charity really means. That you treat your enemies with respect, just like you would treat your friends. And that's when people usually draw the line. All right, now, let's get to the title of today's lesson. Let's go to Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10, and we're going to read a parable about the Good Samaritan. Luke chapter 10, and we're going to read a parable about the Good Samaritan. When you get there, start at verse 25.
And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do? What shall I do to inherit eternal life?
Okay.
He said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? And he answering, saying, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and with all thy neighbor, and with thy neighbor itself.
Okay, so that's the first and greatest commandment, Joe. To love God with all your heart, your mind, and your soul. That's written in Deuteronomy chapter 6. You can read that like verses 1 through 5. So it was important when you talk about loving God. All right, you have to love God that much. Verse 28.
And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. But he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, And who is my neighbor?
All right, so he said now he's looking a little further. Well, who is my neighbor? And that's the title of the lesson. Who is my neighbor? And Jesus is going to tell him a parable. And then we're going to give a little history to get deep in this parable. Because when people talk about the Good Samaritan, Josiah, do you know what a Samaritan is and who it is? If you don't know, just say I don't know.
Not the actual term.
That's the actual term?
Yeah,
we always hear Good Samaritan, but we never hear the relationship between Israel and the Samaritans. We don't know the history behind that to see why this was so significant to the people during that time. All right, so let's start at verse 30 and go ahead.
And Jesus answering said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiments, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead.
All right, so he had a bad day.
And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed on the other side.
All right, so a priest, son of Aaron, when he saw the man, instead of helping him, like if anybody should have known about helping somebody, this priest, right, Joe? You know, just by his title. He saw his own countrymen, and that's what we need to understand. He saw his own countrymen, and he saw him, what happened with him, and what he do? He walked across the street. I mean, I see people, we can go downtown, well, not now. You could have went downtown Chicago a few months back, and you'll see, you know, homeless people, and they might need help, and some people, they just walk past like they don't see them, or they cross the street.
Joe gives them $20.
Well, hey,
Yeah,
he was raised well.
Yeah.
He was raised well. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But, so this priest, instead of helping the fellow Hebrew Israelite or Judean, whatever you want to call him, he went across the street, right? And who else came by? Verse 32.
And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him, and passed by the other side.
All right, so now you got a Levite. Who are the Levites? Levites were the teachers of the priest nation that the Lord established in Egypt. Their job was to go out and teach throughout the whole coast of Israel. They were scattered amongst all the tribes, and they were the teachers, and they did the things in the temple. So he should know better because he's a Levite. So you had the priest, then you have a Levite. Both of them know what to do in this situation, but yet what they do? They went across the street. So who came to help him? Go ahead.
But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him.
All right, hold your place here at 35. Now, why is this so significant? Why is it called the Good Samaritan? Why is it that we're hearing about a Samaritan who was a non-Israelite? That's the thing. Real quick, let's go to St. John chapter 4. We're going to come right back. We're going to read two scriptures. St. John chapter 4, and we're going to start at verse 10. A little history on the Samaritans. When the 10 tribes went into slavery, which you can read into 2 Kings chapter 17, Assyrians took the 10 tribes into slavery. Then the Assyrians in turn took Samaritans of another country and placed them in the land of Israel. So that put a bad taste in the Israelites' mouth. So they want to have nothing to do with these people who were placed there after their brethren got thrown into slavery all over the world, and they haven't been back since. So you have another nation being placed in your homeland from your captors, being put in that land. So Israel didn't want to have anything to do with them whatsoever. St. John chapter 4 and verse 10. Read that one verse. This is the woman by the well talking to Jesus. Go ahead.
Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knowest the gift of God, and who it is that hath to thee, give me to drink. Thou would have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water.
Read verse 11.
The woman said unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with.
I'm sorry, it's verse 9. There you go.
Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest a drink from me, which am a woman from Samaria? For the Jews have no dealing with the Samaritans.
All right, see? So the Jews didn't have any dealings with the Samaritans. So it would be like, it's two different races communicating together that don't like each other. So that's why it was a big thing for this woman to talk to Jesus, because Jesus was a Jew. When she was a Jew, he was an Israelite. And she said, the Jews don't have no dealing with us. So that's why Jesus used a Samaritan. And here's one more example, Acts chapter 10, and we're going to read verse 28. This is when Peter went to Cornelius' house. And it's amazing how people take this verse talking about you can eat unclean things, but they don't have anything to do with unclean stuff or eating whatsoever. But this was talking about how there was always a division between Israel and other nations. And God had to show Peter a vision that he can call no man common on unclean. Acts chapter 10 and verse 28. When you get there, go ahead.
And he said unto them, Ye know how that it is unlawful thing for a man that is Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation. But God hath showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean.
So that was the division. That's what was integral. Now, it wasn't a law in God's law. That was a law amongst themselves, because the Lord talked throughout the entire Old Testament how to deal with strangers. So it was a big division between the Samaritans and the Israelites. So when Jesus made this parable about the Good Samaritan, that was crossing major boundaries. And that's why I stuck with people so much, because we had a priest and a Levite of their own country not help another countryman, but you have a foreigner who was despised by the Jews coming to help. So this is why Jesus used a Samaritan in this particular parable. So we're back at verse 35. So go back to Luke chapter 10 and verse 35. And we'll go ahead and wrap this up. When you get there, go ahead.
And on the morrow when he departed, he took out 2 pence and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I repay thee. Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was the neighbor unto that among who fell to the thieves?
All right, so which one you think the neighbor is?
The Samaritan.
The Good Samaritan, right. Because he was willing to help somebody who would have been technically his enemy. He saw his enemy in a bad situation, he helped him. He not only helped him to get to a place that's safe, he went beyond. He even paid for his room and his board and his food. And what Jesus said here in verse 37?
And he said, He that showed mercy on him, then said Jesus unto him, Go, and do thou likewise.
All right, so he said show mercy. But show mercy unto who? Your enemies, those you're not you basically don't like. So let's say somebody was picking on you all day, Josiah, in high school when you was driving back and forth. picking on you, making fun of you, say, hey, look at you, dreadhead, ha 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 ha. You know, saying stuff like that. If you see him when his car stopped on the side of the road on I-65, and you just happen to be on I-65, and he started walking, what would be the proper thing to do?
Probably just pull over and say, hey, do you need a ride? Are you okay?
Right.
Yeah.
That would be the proper thing to do.
Then they'll say no, and then I'll leave.
If he says no and you leave, then that's fine. Long as you, see, I'm glad you did that. You said that. He said, if he say no and you leave, that is fine. Matter of fact, let's go to Proverbs chapter 25. Proverbs chapter 25. Because some people think, well, you know, in the Old Testament, it's this, boom, 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 boom. But in the New Testament, it's all about love and loving your enemies and different things like that. Like it's some difference between Zechariah and Matthew. Basically, it's all in one book, and the book basically says the same thing, both old and new. Look at Proverbs chapter 25. Even talking about how to deal with your neighbor or deal with your enemies. Because who's your neighbor? Anybody. Any human walking this earth. Male or female. If you like them, if you don't like them, they are still your neighbor. Proverbs chapter 25 and start at verse 21. When you get there, go ahead.
If thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat. And if he be thirsty, give him water to drink.
Mm-hmm.
For thou shalt keep coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord shall reward thee.
All right. So look what it said. It said, if your enemy be thirsty, you give him drink, right? If your enemy be hungry, you give him bread to eat. It said, in doing so, you shall heap coals of fire on his head. Now, what does the Lord mean by that? It means that if you go out your way to help him, to honestly help them, then, and they refuse it, God's going to punish them for that. Not you. You are doing what you're supposed to do. Now, you got to earnestly try to help your brother. You got to earnestly, like brother Paul used to say, say out the hand of fellowship. Because you're trying to gain your brother. But if they refuse it, then God's will punish them for it. Now, let's go to the New Testament. Let's go to Romans chapter 12. Just to show you how the Old Testament and New Testament saying basically the same thing. It's just people want to think, because I heard people say it, in the New Testament, it's all about love. You know, you're supposed to love your enemies. And the Old Testament said hate your enemies. It said love your enemies in the Old Testament too. Not in those exact words, but it does talk about how you deal with your enemies in the Old Testament, because it's one book. That's why it's important to identify who your neighbor is. But once you identify who your neighbor is, then you got to learn how to walk with them. Romans chapter 12 and verse 9. When you get there, go ahead.
Let love be without dissimulation.
Okay, so then love be without dissemination. Go ahead.
If honor that which is evil, cleave to that which is good.
So it said, abhor that which is evil. Yeah, abhor, hate that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. So you're going to see some stuff. You still love people, but you don't have to be buddy-buddy, acting like stuff is just great and this, and this. It's like, look, if somebody I don't like got a flat tire, I'm going to change their tire. If somebody don't like need me to do something for them, it may irk me, but I'm going to do it. It's my obligation to being like Christ. But that don't mean I have to sit there and like what they do and act like it don't exist either. So it said, let love be without dissemination, abhor that which is evil, cleave to that which is good. Verse 10.
Be kindly affectionate one to another with brotherly love, and honor preferring one another.
Jump down to verse 14 and go ahead.
Bless them which persecute you.
Persecute
you. Bless and curse not.
Didn't we just read that in Matthew 5?
Yes.
So it says, bless them which persecute you. Bless and curse not. So don't cuss them out because you don't like them. They made you mad. Verse 15.
Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep.
So it says, in other places it says, bear one another burdens. So if your enemy is going through a hard time, you try to help console them. Because your whole purpose is gaining a brother, is gaining a neighbor, is fixing relationships. That's what Christ wants us to do. Verse 9. 16, yes.
Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but consent to men of low estate. and be not wise in your own consents.
Verse 17.
Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men.
So it says recompense. So don't pay somebody back evil for evil. They say, ooh, I'm going to get them back. Don't say I'm going to get revenge on them. Verse 18.
If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men.
So the Lord understands it might not be possible, right? So he's not going to put no burden on you you can't bear. It's like, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Verse 19.
Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, and I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in doing so, thou shalt heap coals of fire in his head.
Didn't we just read that in the Old Testament? So I'm saying the Old Testament and New Testament say the same thing about love and how to react with one another. It's just we get in this mindset because of doctrine that from Zechariah to Matthew, there's this wall. Like there's some dramatic change that is not one book that goes straight into the other. So when we talk about who is our neighbor is any son and daughter of Adam, including our enemies. And that's where the thing comes. People we don't like. Even Daniel, the king, threw him in a lion's den. He had every right to, in the world opinion, to have choice words from him when he came out, right? But he didn't. He respected him and he let it go. So even if somebody you don't like, those in power and those in not, you be as graceful as you possibly can. He said, therefore, if thy enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in doing so, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head, read in the Proverbs, verse 21.
Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good.
So overcome evil with good. So we got about 28 seconds left. We got it in. With these 6 scriptures, well, a little bit more than 6. We added 2 extra ones that was on our list. So that's what. Who is your neighbor? And if we understood how to deal with one another, this world would be a totally different place. Especially understanding this basic lesson right here. And this is one of those milk lessons. Alexa, cancel timer. All right. So we're going to go ahead and open up the, we have any questions or response or anything from the crowd? What we have.
So kind of earlier when we were talking about the men not prostituting their daughters, Isaiah K. Said men in some cultures would sell their daughters to pay off debts.
Mm-hmm.
Their daughters would then work for brothels and whatnot.
Right. Yeah.
Evelyn R. Jackson says, hi, Devin and Joe.
Hello.
Were we recording when you were struggling with it? No, you missed. You didn't get this? Okay. Britt says, this makes so much sense. God knows what we can and can't handle.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, like I said, and even in the different church communities, you can see that. Even within the same church building, you have people who don't get along. And this is totally out the window. So this is something, no matter how learned you are in the Bible or how unlearned you are in the Bible, this is something that we all can grow in. Because this is one of those important lessons as far as the walk. That's why Paul said, fight the good fight. This is one of them. You have another comment?
Right. It's crazy because he says speak up for yourself, but it's all in how you say it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I had a question or comment or something maybe for you to follow up on. You said earlier that, if someone is your enemy or that basically you can't get along, because I think not everyone calls people their enemy.
Right.
It could just be somebody that
You
you
just don't get
struggle
along
to
with.
get along with.
Right.
And you said, well, you know, you don't have to hang around there and all that kind of. Well, how do you know? Like, when is the time to try to restore your brother or sister, or when you need to distance? You know, not social distance, because you all have to do that now, but like distance yourself from them. And how do you do that in a way where it doesn't make it a problem?
Well, it depends. It depends if it's just your personality clash or what is an issue that came up between the two. So I guess if it's an issue, then we can go to Matthew 18 and you talk with them one-on-one, and if that doesn't work, then you go to a party that both parties respect and try to resolve the issue. If that don't work, then you just distance yourself from them. And then if it's just which personalities will clash, you just kind of slowly wean yourself from them if you can, because you know when to start doing it if it causes you to transgress. When you get to the point where I'm about to snap.
Or before you transgress.
Before you transgress,
you
right?
Feel tempted,
right? Because it kind of go back to Leviticus 19. This is kind of a point when you feel like you probably should remove yourself from the situation.
And when you say transgress, it doesn't mean that you feel like you're gonna like literally kill them.
No.
But it's something even less dramatic, like
yeah. Leviticus
like
19 and
start communication about to come out.
Right. Leviticus 19 and start at verse 17. Just read this one verse right here.
Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart.
Now, when it starts to get to that point, and your heart is your mind. So when it starts to get to that point, that's when you probably should start removing yourself from that individual. Not just, if y'all go, like, let's say you go to the same church. You still got to be church family, but you don't have to be all next to it. Buddy. And even if it's might be awkward, but is that awkwardness might be better than a scene. So, and it's all about communication. And if that person, if you got to talk with them, of course you got to let that person know. If you just say, we butt heads a lot, you just keep it light. Or however the Lord leads you to do it. But you do. Huh?
Okay, how do you say that without angering the other person?
It depends on who the individual is.
Let's use some wisdom there.
Yeah, because you can't say the same thing for everybody and get the same reaction. I don't know, like an example would be, I'm trying to think of one. I don't know, it depends on the situation.
I can think of several. That probably says more about me.
But it takes wisdom, and it takes you can ask the Lord to even guide you while you're in that situation. But that's why Paul said in Romans, as much as possibly in you live peaceably with all men. But it might not be possible because there's a lot of different personalities out there.
But I have found, and it took me over 40 years to get this right, that having that hard conversation makes all the difference in the world. You usually don't have to bring in that third person, that mediator.
No.
Even if it means that you realize that we're probably never going to see eye to eye, but if you have that conversation first and it shows respect for each other in a respectable way, it makes a humongous difference. No, you're not best friends, but you can at least be functional.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it might make
it's hard though.
It can make a game out of it. Not a game, make some jokes out of it every now and then, but you never know. Yeah. But that's the thing. Sometimes people believe that Christianity is this smile, everything loving, this, when actually it's rough. It's hard.
Very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's hard, and it's dealing with other personalities and other people. It's the hardest thing in the walk. Then you got to try not to sin yourself. It's hard enough keeping your own self from sinning.
Hard. Yeah.
Then you got other people who come in the mix, and you can't stop them from doing whatever they do, but you can't get pulled into, their shenanigans or whatever. All right. Any other questions or comments? Or?
Oh, you're welcome, Brittany. She said, "Thank you for saying that, Mrs. K."
All right. So like I said, anybody got any topics they would like to discuss for our next 30 minutes? Because we did this in 30 minutes, it's gonna a little bit over, so we can go ahead and wrap it up. Go ahead and post it on the.
I don't think people mind when we go over with the after part.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just they don't want to hear us talking for all the time.
That's right. They don't want to be lectured at for over 30 minutes.
I don't blame them.
It's so challenging and emotional, honestly.
It is. Yeah. It is. But like I was saying, anything you want to talk about, post it on our Bible Christian Facebook page. I already got one for next week, and we're gonna be dealing with that next Friday. And just as a reminder, let me go ahead and make that announcement now. Tomorrow at 2:00 is going to be our regular Sabbath lesson. And then also, the last day of the feast is this Tuesday at 1 p.m. The last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So I hope everybody enjoying their Feast of Unleavened Bread. Hope they got all the leaven out. This has been a good Passover week. Different. Very different Passover week. But it's been good nonetheless. I hope everybody being safe out there. A lot of people choose to ignore their social distancing. That's fine. Just boost up on the zinc and
That's
the
not
immune.
fine.
That's not fine.
It is not fine.
That's their business. I'm just saying. If you're gonna do that,
It's not.
boost up on the zinc and
Not their
vitamins and different things like that.
They're killing people.
Yeah, well, people do what they do. All right. So who's your neighbor? That's it on that one. And if nothing else, we will go ahead and see you guys tomorrow at 2 p.m. and then Tuesday at 1 for the 7th day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Have a blessed night.